It still says that it's still showing that you're live on the tube. So
It won't for like 30 seconds.
there we go.
And then I gotta go back to the Discord and let everybody know.
The lag is something else.
Yeah, I have no idea about the lag. Welcome in, Jim.
I'm gonna just turn the volume off, and I'm not even gonna look at the screen on the YouTube. I mean, I don't know what else to do. The chat
you're
works.
Fine. You're fine.
The chat seems to work fine. But you know what this calls for is
a drink.
Octane. Octane. This is a Tullibardine single malt 15. So yes.
While Wolf is staying in, I want to take this time to apologize to everybody. Technical glitches happen all over the place. We know, and that just proves that I'm not AI. Welcome in, Jim, Puffy Cheeto, Spezia Poet, Kirk, Teeny, Ron, and Ruby. When they get back in, I know it's gonna. I know to be a night. So yeah. So tonight's going to be a step away from D&D and a step into really the world that myself and Archaeowolf do based on your guys. And your questions were awesome this week, mind you. Now, the first question of the evening is going to come from Amanda, come from our good friend Papito, who is on the Council of Chris members. And it is, and we're just going to get right into it because we're 15, 20 minutes into this.
Dive right in.
Yeah, let's dive right in.
Yeah.
So, Amanda asks, you are given free range, no budget cap, the sky's the limit to produce, direct any book or book series into a mini series. Well, multi-season show, your choice, or multi-season show, your choice. What book or book series are you choosing, and what actors would you pick for characters in your show? Now, I chose something that's near and dear to the stream's heart, and that's because I love the series. I know Ron loves the series. I know we all love it when Ron does his October reads every October. So I would do an Amber Chronicles series. And here's the cast of the people who I'd choose. Oscar Isaac as Corwin. Taryn as Random. Mads Mikkelsen as Benedict. Tom Hiddleston as Blaze. Cillian Murphy as Brand. Anna Taylor-Joy as Fiona. Charlize Theron as Flora. Alexander Skarsgård as Julian. Dave Bautista as Gerard. Pedro Pascal as Kane. And Eva Green as Deidre. Now, Wolf, I sent you a list of the questions.
Yeah, you sent me a list of the questions. When? Because I got them at like 1 o'clock today.
That's what I sent him.
Yeah. So this is the part where I'm going to point out that I absolutely am horrifically bad at pop culture and celebrities. Okay. I don't know who 2/3 of the people that you just talked about are.
Oh.
Skarsgård, Mikkelsen, I do, but like, yeah, I don't. In the book, I've never read the book.
Well, this is my story. This is
So
what
yeah.
question would or what stuff would you adapt?
So when I was a kid, my first a little darker, you know. So I like it.
I love Picard.
Yeah, I absolutely love it. The second season was, but the third season was peak
Yeah.
because I have a thing for the ships. I love the ships. I love the tech. I love the outside, you know, the ship scenes, the flight scenes. I really like that. And Picard had way more of that than the others.
Yeah. Well, it's because you're interstellar battlecruiser captain.
I am. I have a model of the ship that sits up that they gave me. You know, all captains have a model of their ship on their desk because you have to be reminded what you're standing on. I guess
some captains are still in their ship.
Right. I'm not.
So we've got a lot going on in the chat.
Yeah.
We probably should.
Yes, much buffering.
Yeah, much buffering. We do apologize for that. We're going to move on to question 2. Question 2 comes from Kirk. And it is, what is the first known use of electricity? He doesn't want any of that Baghdad battery stuff. I know nothing of this Baghdad battery. And he wants to know who first lit a fire or plated gold or sheared a goat using electricity. So with that, I can tell you the first use of electricity that I found.
I can too.
Was the electric eels? They were ancient Egyptians
for treating gout. The Egyptians and the Romans and cultures around the Mediterranean treated gout with them, with electric eels. Now, the first generation of electricity is written down in 600 BCE by the Greeks. But one particular Greek realized that you could get a static charge if you rubbed animal fur against a piece of amber. I don't know why the amber is significant, but that was where they were able to create the first, like, oh, hey, zap kind of electrical charge. That wasn't generated by a fish. And then after that, it seems to be very slept on for a while. And then in the 1600s, you have a mathematician give it the name of electricity, or what becomes electricity. I think he wrote it in Latin or French. I can't remember. And then, he distinguishes its difference from magnetism. So you have electricity. They know what electricity is, and they have magnetism, and they're probably raw magnet iron, whatever. And then it gets into the 1800s, where you have the application of electricity, which is when you'd have a sheared goat, and they start putting electricity to things that people would use every day. To be perfectly honest, shearing a goat with electric shears probably didn't happen until the 20th century.
That's shearing a goat or any animal with electricity.
Small.
Late 19th century.
Yeah. Okay. So late 19th century, because you got to have the infrastructure for the electricity. Everything's plugged in. You have to have a power generation point. And if you're way out in the sticks, you're not going to have electricity poles coming to your house. You're going to use the old shears. So, yeah. Electricity on the grand scale of human use is actually really short. Like, really short. I would say, like, electric lighting would be the first, but that's like the 1870s, really, is where you have large-scale electric lighting.
Mm-hmm. Luigi Bruganitelli in 1805 using Alessandro Volta's battery was the first electroplating.
Yeah, the battery was. Mm-hmm. Okay.
So
I'm thinking like large scale though.
Right. No. But
I mean, you can have an event. You can have an event like this go back all the way to the 1700s and turned on a light bulb using this battery. It's the only one. That's not an application. That's a cool science experiment. That's not an application in my mind. You want application? that's when people are utilizing it. That's when you see it appearing on ships because the engines are turning, and they're able to generate electricity. You're starting to develop the ancillary stuff to produce it. Not necessarily the electricity itself, but you're developing the technology to produce it. Because think about it, with an alternator or a generator, you'd have to be able to make steel or iron bearings that don't fail or can be serviceable. You'd have to know that you have to use magnet against copper wire, and you got to spin it at a rotation. I mean, there's lots of scientific development that would go with that before you have an application of, hey, we can generate stuff, and now let's make it do a thing. There's a big run between there.
So you want to take the chat? IIRC.
So the Egyptians could do electroplating. Yes, they could. And that's actually what the Baghdad battery is thought to be. One of the hypotheses that the Baghdad battery is a chemical power source to do electroplating. Now, there have been, one of the things the pseudoscientists don't ever tell you is that there has been amount of study of the Baghdad battery, because archaeologists, contrary to what the pseudoscientists say, we absolutely want to know this shit. We absolutely want to find out what this shit's for. So there's been a lot of work done, and chemical tests from inside the Baghdad battery, or one example that was with it that was broken, shows all of these chemicals that I don't know off the top of my head that essentially do electrolysis. And they made one. They used everything that they could was the same, and they made a Baghdad battery, and it made about the same amount of power as a potato clock. For everybody who remembers making a clock out of potatoes in science class when you were in second grade. So the idea that it powered lights or lasers for cutting stone or all this stuff that the ancient aliens pseudoscience crackpots will tell you, that's completely out of the woods, out of the bushes, out in the 40 somewhere. That's ridiculous. Lots of science has gone into disproving that. It was on Mythbusters. They made a version of it to explain it to people. But the actual scientific tests show that, yeah, this produces a minuscule amount. Now, if there was a either more refined version, or the material that they were using to generate the chemical reaction, essentially to make the electricity, was different in Egypt, they had a different source of whatever's in it. Again, not a battery specialist here. They might be getting a little bit more power out of it. But yeah, electroplating is one of the things that the Baghdad battery is thought to be. The other thing that I think had something to do with preservation of scrolls or something like that. I cannot quite remember. Again, it's an article I saw a while ago. But yeah, it was very limited technology, specialized, very specialized technology too, which is why you don't see it absolutely everywhere. You see it in places, Egypt, and then the Baghdad battery itself was found in Iraq, which was one of the biggest civilizations at the time, as during its time period as well. So you have these two technologies that are only found in super large populated areas. You're not going to find it out in Europe. You're not going to find it in Africa. You're not going to find it out in Asia, because those places are just too remote. There's no reason to have such a specialized thing like that. But you get into a bigger concentrated population of people in a big city, have chances to develop things like that and uses for it. Cool. That's where you see it, as population centers. Most technology evolves in a population center.
And that right there is going to
tie
into a question later this evening. You absolutely know more about the Baghdad battery than I do. I'm a bad archaeologist. I've only been doing this for 2 years.
You're not a bad archaeologist. It's a bit of pseudoscience. So the Baghdad battery is an OOPArt. Have you ever heard that?
And I studied Akkadian. Okay. I studied the Akkadian Empire in college.
It's not a. Well, it's not. It's. I don't know if it's tied especially to the Arcadians or not. I can't remember. Well, yeah, but you have the Assyrians, the Persians, the Medians, the Elamites, the Babylonians. Judeans, the Ionians, the Lydians. You have all these cultures that exist in the rise of the Middle East, everything. An UPART it stands for out of place artifact. It's an acronym. And the thing is like, here is something that is out of place, doesn't fit in. The London Hammer is a great example of an UPART, or the Koso artifact, which is a spark plug in a concrete inside of a rock.
I just saw a video on that come across my FYP on TikTok earlier today.
Right?
From
yeah.
I don't know who was it? Was it
some
guy?
Some loudmouth. Some loudmouth son of a bitch. So those are out of place artifacts, because they're exalted to be something by a certain group or a certain bunch of people, and they turn out to not be a thing. But they don't fit in because all of their provenience information has been lost, right?
That's kind of like the
spark
pickaxe.
plug that I talk about.
It's kind of like the pickaxe that's stuck in the freaking concrete, or stuck in the rock too, or is that
that's
London
Hammer?
Okay,
that's the London Hammer. So the London Hammer is a hand forged hammerhead and a piece of wood. It's in a rock. What it's in is essentially fast set sandstone, which means any time that Europeans with iron technology were in the state of fucking Texas, or what would become Texas, it's very possible that some poor bastard dropped his hammer out of a wagon in the river, or when he was building a bridge or something, and it is the hammer sunk into the silt, and then the river dried up because it's seasonal or whatever, and hardens into a rock, and then if they have a drought for a couple of years, it hardens even more. So you have this block of rock with a piece of hammer in it. The whole thing has this ridiculous convoluted story. Not a single archaeologist has actually looked at it. It's in the collection of that Creationist Museum in Glen Rose, Texas, that has a really bad channel on TikTok. And they say, oh, this shows that that evolution isn't true because it's a hammer encased in stone, and scientists tell us stone takes thousands and millions of years to form. It's like, concrete's technically a stone. I've seen stuff set up in 15 minutes. Where's the provenience information? They can't even tell you where they found it. In Glen Rose, Texas. That's like 50 square miles on a map if you want to look at the zip code. The Koso artifact is a spark plug that was found in the mountains in California, a place that has a lot of naturally occurring salt. So here's an iron artifact, 30s. It's a spark plug that you would see in a Model T or a Model A that is inside of a concretion. The chemical reaction of salt and iron and water has made this, has kind of glommed all of this gravel around it together. So you have a block of rock about this big. It looks like a chunk of rust. And the guy thought it was a geode, and he tried to cut it in half, and it turned out to be a spark plug. This is another artifact that this Lost World Creationist Museum has, that they won't let any actual archaeologists look at, and they don't have any provenience information for, where they say, hey, this is proof that science is lying to you. And you would probably know about this, one of the most intact medical equipment bags ever discovered from a shipwreck is on the Queen Anne's Revenge.
Mm-hmm.
And it's in a concretion. It is literally, they had a block that was shipwrecked. They're like, this probably has something in it. They ran it through an MRI or an X-ray, and it showed like syringes and a bone saw and all this stuff. But it's the chemical reaction of the metal fittings and the metal tools and stuff with the material around it that has resulted in a block. So that is technically an UPART if it didn't have any other context. The Koso artifact, the spark plug, has no context. It's out of place. So when you have an UPART like the Baghdad Battery, which was found in the, at the beginning of the century, and has a lot of stuff floating around with it. These are things that the pseudoscience community will glom onto and say, we don't know very much about it. And that may be true, because when it was first discovered, the Ankytheria mechanism is a great example of this as well. Discovered in 1903, it's just a concretion. Can't look at it. Oh, this is obviously some sort of technology. The only way you could figure it out is by breaking it apart and cleaning it into each individual piece. Well, that's just dumb. You've seen beautiful artifacts that we probably shouldn't touch because they're so fragile. Well, fast forward to 2005, scanning technology has become so good. Scan this thing and make a 3D printed model of it. They were able to scan it, break it into all of its individual pieces, print all of the individual pieces, and put it together. And that's when they established exactly what it was. It has, it's not that we don't know what it is. No, we don't know what it is when we first found it 100 and change years ago. We know what it is now. Doesn't mean aliens did it, So, yeah.
I'm just reading the chat and responding.
The acid-filled rocks.
Well, not just the acid-filled rocks, but our chat is blowing up with electrolysis because of the hairless pharaoh.
Oh, the hairless pharaohs. Oh, yes. Well, it doesn't help that half the pharaohs were probably barely teenagers when they came to power, because hey, you can control a teenager, you can't control their parents. Plus, I'm sure there was a lot of genetic boogery going on with the rampant incest. Probably didn't help. But yeah, electrolysis for hair removal. Yeah, maybe. I haven't seen anything about that, but I also haven't looked. I think so. Shock treatment for the body, not the brain. That's the electric eels.
Yeah.
The electric zappy fish.
So
yeah, the theory that the Baghdad batteries were for holding scrolls. Wonder which is true. That's the other thing. Exactly. Which is it? And yeah, a scroll preservation in some form. But until we find a really intact example that has even more evidence and more stuff associated with it that we could actually look at, that's going to be kind of one of those questions up in the air. But it doesn't have to be aliens. The Baghdad battery was found when archaeology was still figuring out its methodology, and they were looking at all of the really cool stuff and kind of ignoring the pedestrian stuff. But the pedestrian stuff is where we get most of our information.
Pedestrian stuff is the fun stuff.
Pedestrian stuff is the fun stuff. It's also the most dangerous stuff if you do it wrong.
Do you think the museums, the one there in Texas and the one there, your favorite museum in Tennessee, do you think
I trashed the Lost World Museum in Texas way more than I trashed the Ark experience.
No. I was talking about the Wyatt Museum in Tennessee. Ron Wyatt's Archaeological Museum is in Tennessee.
Oh, God. I didn't even know it was a museum. I thought it was a cheesy website made in 1997.
No, it's the Wyatt Archaeological Museum in Tennessee.
God. Well, I've never really thought about it. I just saw the website for it, and I was like, oh, look, this bullshit. And then I really didn't care looking at what they have. It's probably like in a double wide.
It's not. It
like
looks
one of those double wides that's on a lot that was like a construction office at one point. So it's never been set up as a house, but it's got that really grocery store carpeting, which is like has no give to it, and depressing wood paneling.
If you actually pull it up on Wiki, it's actually a ranch style home. Kind of like,
really?
So we have a store here in the South called Babcock's, and it's a furniture store, and it kind of looks like a Babcock's.
Really?
Yeah. Large front porch, like Wyatt Archaeological Museum over the front doors. My question was, if they
Ron
didn't think
Wyatt.
we were, if they didn't know we were archaeologists and we went in there to look at their artifacts, do you think they'd allow us to look at their artifacts if we didn't
I'm sure
claim
they
to be
would.
archaeologists?
I'm sure. So here's the thing: is that if we didn't announce that we were professionals in this field and we showed up with the express intention to fuck up their day, they'd let us in. They'd let us into the one in Glen Rose too.
That sounds
Guaranteed.
sounds like a TV series.
They
right there.
won't let you see stuff though. I said that. This is not this. So the TV thing is not new. The TV thing is not new because I was approached in 2020 when I had like 70,000 people on TikTok. I was approached in 2020 to do a TV show by a producer, and he wanted me to do the Aztec Gold show. He wanted me to weigh in as an archaeologist on Aztec Gold, which is complete bullshit. Finding Aztec gold moved up here with no pack animals to Arizona. And this one treasure hunter family's looking for it. It's essentially Oak Island with more, border crossing. I don't know. It's really stupid. But they wanted me to be on this show, and they sent me 10 questions to answer. Like, do little videos of me answering these questions like I was being interviewed. And I looked at them and I sent an email back and I said, as a professional in this field who really does like working in this field and has a decent job in it, I can only, in good conscience, respond favorably to like 2 of these. I can't say that we like working with treasure hunters. We don't. Treasure hunters are looters of archaeological sites. We hate that shit. I can't be dismissive of the fact that the pursuit of gold by the Spanish was incredibly destructive to indigenous culture. I can't ignore that.
No, absolutely.
So when and then I didn't hear from the guy for a while, and then I reached out again. I said, "Hey, are you still, like, you said you're going to do something else? What do you got? I mean, I want to hear it." And I didn't hear from him about a year, and then he came back and he said, "I want to have a conversation with you and these other producers." So I had to sit down with like 3 or 4 guys, 3 guys. One of them's name was Duke, so it's good. Where we had a Teams call talking about my own show, and they broached what do you think of conspiracies? And I whipped out my piece of paper and I was like, hey, I got an idea. What if you did a show tearing apart conspiracies? It's dramatic. You're gonna have people get pissed off. It's gonna be blah blah blah, but we could tear apart conspiracies and actually educate people. What about having an actual educational TV show? I've never heard so much hemming and hawing from old guys in my life. Well, it's not what I was like, guys, understand something. You want drama, you want a hook, you want to get people's attention. I am literally an archaeologist that will get out of a snorkeled truck with the hat and be like, sup, we're learning fucking archaeology, and kind of be abrasive. And that gets television. My TikTok says so. And they were like, yeah, no. We want you to do conspiracy theories. And I was like, no, not interested in that. We can do something educational all day long, because it's more interesting than the pseudoscience bullshit. I also then offered, I was like, hey, how about this? Graham Hancock's show had come out, the first season. I said, hey, why don't you have an archaeologist or several professional archaeologists set out to prove him right? He complains that we don't take him seriously. He complains that we don't look in all the places where his evidence is. It's like, well, why don't we have that happen? Why not? And they never got back to me.
And they won't. Because it doesn't make them money.
And they won't, because Graham Hancock won't have a TV show if we prove him wrong. Or if we prove him right, even. We could go prove Graham Hancock right, and he wouldn't have a TV show anymore. Because his TV show hinges on the mysterious and hinges on the, I know something and you don't, but I'm going to share it with you. Bullshit. So, yeah.
Well, let's get to the heart of the matter tonight. We're going to skip Puffy Cheeto's next question because it really...
Puffy Cheeto wrote another question?
Yeah, she wrote another question. But I want to go through this real quick.
So I've been planning a game for many years, creating my own world from the theology up, theology down. Anyway, I've been trying to get a game together. I've managed to get 5 players, 5 people that are going to be interesting to play with. But I'm looking forward to playing this game. I'm looking forward to running this game because I'm actually the DM and I'm terrible at advertising. I'm terrible at it. So the 17th is going to be our introduction to characters and basic information about the stream. I don't think we're actually going to get too far into a session, but it's going to be introduction to characters and things like that. And I'm genuinely hoping that that we can draw enough interest to help out some of the people playing, because yeah, we all need a little bit of help. So, looking forward to seeing you on Saturday at 12:30 Central Time. I think that's everything. Is that everything? Diesel. Is that everything? Yeah, that's everything. I think that's everything. All right. See you there. At this tag with these people playing D&D. Goodbye. Hello.
Now, that was the Fox announcement. We'll get back to that in a moment. But Puffy Cheeto asks if we could become an expert in one skill or subject instantly, Matrix style. What would it be and why? And I thought of a really great skill of comprehension. And I say that, not necessarily Matrix style comprehension, but Matrix style comprehension, but with the reading ability of Johnny Five. You could read a book extremely fast and then comprehend it immediately.
Okay.
What about
Johnny Five?
You don't know who Johnny Five is? Short Circuit? You are...
Well, now you're cutting out. Now it's just it cutting out. So now I'm never going to know.
Short Circuit.
Oh, God. I haven't seen that movie in 35 years. God. That's vintage.
We're vintage.
Shush. I'm going to live forever. God, I don't know.
It was just a thought. We get back to her question next week. I'll do something for her question next week. But the question everybody's here for is, perhaps this would be a good time for us to learn history. What are the most common reasons for civilizations to collapse? And this is everybody. This is the reason why I brought my good friend Archaeowolf in, because he's a lot better at explaining this stuff than I am. So please.
Are you sure about that?
You've been doing it a lot longer than me.
Well. So, Yeah. So everybody understands what a civilization is, right?
A collective group of people come together to
a collective group of people under some form of government. Usually, the parameters of having a civilization, and civilization is kind of a naughty word anymore because it's very Eurocentric. It's like, well, you could have all of these things and not have city streets. You could have music, you can have education, you could have
a writing
record
system.
keeping, you can have writing system, you can have all of this stuff. That's why when the Spanish got to the Americas, they were like, all of these people are uncivilized. They have 9 out of the 10 things that we consider civilized, but they don't have a writing system. When in reality, it's just pictograph based like the Egyptians, but it's a fucking writing system. And they also weren't Christian or white, which is, we got to be that to be civilized. But the idea that that where are we going? Civilization, that you have to meet this criteria to be civilized is weird. But the civilization itself, think of the Egyptians, think of the Romans, think of these ancient cultures that are very distinguished by certain aspects that come down to us through history. They rise, they exist, they're very successful in some cases, and then they all fall. And for a long time, the fall of a civilization is like this. It's just the end. Like everybody dies at the end of the movie, when that's not really the case. Civilizations change. Fall is I don't know if I would call it as accurate to be used as much as it is. I would say that the structure collapses and it becomes something else. So, like the Babylonians. The Babylonian culture falls. Civilization falls. Who do they become? The Medians and the Persians. The Persian Empire collapses. What did they, why do they collapse? Well, Alexander the Great showed up and spread some Hellenism and defeated their armies in battle and took over all of their stuff. The people didn't leave. They just adopted a different cultural practice and identity for a while. And then the Greeks got kicked out again, and it became the Khwarezmian Shah and all of this stuff. So you have the people are still there. The framework for the civilization is still there. But like the big identity, that's what rises, and that's what becomes the most well known, and that's what collapses. And those are the marks of falling civilization. There's 5 reasons why a civilization falls?
Yeah. Let's get to
4 out of the 5 are humans.
Environmental stress.
Just cliff notes it. Humans. Environmental stress.
Political fragmentation.
Humans.
Economic imbalance. External pressure.
Humans.
Social or cultural rigidity. And
humans.
And the 6th one, loss of complexity.
Humans.
So all 6
so
are humans.
Of the 6, 5 of them, the cornerstone is humanity. The cornerstone of why that civilization falls is humanity. Something to do with humans. Environmental is pretty straightforward. The Nabateans are a great example of this environmental change. The Nabateans, for those who don't know, you remember the carved temple in Indiana Jones in the 3rd one? That big sandstone carved structure in the canyon? That is Petra. That's the site of Petra in Jordan. And that is part of the Nabatean culture, which comes up and rises, in I think the late 800s and fragments and ends. That might be a little earlier than that. God, I can't remember. Anyway, they're this really successful culture and civilization, even though they exist in the middle of the goddamn desert. And the whole reason why this civilization grew the way it did and became powerful and became known and was a place on the map and a part of the world at the time is because their economy based around trade, like all of it. And they had water. The area where Petra was built had lots of naturally occurring springs. It was an oasis. And they built their civilization in this area. They had all of these rain catch features as well for the few times a year it rained, where it would feed into cisterns and stuff like that. They had this amazing water system that was beholden to the naturally occurring springs. And they were in the middle of the desert, where that was the only place you could go if you wanted to be relatively quick in the transport of your goods. So all of the caravans from the east going west and the west going east would go through Nabatean territory. And the Nabateans would tax them accordingly. And in the same vein, they would also have stuff brought in. So you have this culture, this civilization that's very based on trade, very dependent, if you think about it, on everything else around it. And the one thing, the one cornerstone they have, which is the supply of water, is very tenuous, because the end of the Nabatean civilization happens when an earthquake, a massive earthquake, happens in the Middle East, and it shifts the plate, the tectonic plate, and that shearing motion destroyed most of the springs, like cut them off. So there's no more water coming up from the aquifer. It's just sheared off. So suddenly their water is gone almost overnight. No one's going to come there for water if you don't have water.
Nope.
No one's going to stay if you don't have water. You know, the modern comparison could be Detroit. You know, every bit of the economy that supports your population, the way your population is able to feed itself and water itself and shelter itself and reproduce, all of the things that support, you know, water, shelter, and food, shelter, and reproduction, all of that stuff that is reliant on transportation and commerce disappears, because the one thing you had is now gone from an environmental disaster, an earthquake. That's an environmental situation.
Mm-hmm.
You know, droughts, massive droughts. That's another environmental thing. You have the Songhai Empire in Africa, Timbuktu. You know, those places, when they first started, they were actually kind of lush. There was actually a lot more vegetation there. They were very successful in those places. And then, you know, in the 10th century, you have a couple of pretty significant global impacting eruptions in the Pacific, which lower the temperature like 2 degrees across the entire planet. And entire nation states starve to death because that 2 degrees was enough to make the grain not grow or produce as much or whatever. The Songhai Empire collapses in part to that event. The Viking colonies in Greenland collapse because of that event, because it's just enough of this tenuous environmental thread that when it changes, you can't support yourself anymore. So environmental by itself is pretty, you know, as a by itself thing is incredibly rare. It usually folds in with other stuff. But yeah, environmental is the only one that doesn't have anything to do necessarily with people. All of the others have a human component, which just shows that humans ruin everything. What was external forces?
The external pressure,
The civilization
invasions,
collapses,
mass migrations, that
or
all
external
comes-
pressure.
That all really ties into environmental stress.
Today, yep, it ties into environmental stress, yes, because environmental stress might be driving people from another place. You know, the potato famine, as famine as it was, you have 40 million Irish immigrants come to the Americas.
Question.
You know, because of an environmental thing.
Question.
But that also fundamentally changes the framework of American society at the time. Question.
Do you know that the potato isn't native to Ireland?
Yes.
Do you know where it came from?
I did know that. South Pacific.
Peru.
Oh yeah, Peru.
They were imported
No,
into
so
Peru.
the South Pacific connection is that there's bird skeletons, chicken skeletons that have been found in middens in Southeast Asia that match the DNA profile of birds that are raised in Chile. And people are like, oh, they went back and forth and it was trade and it was a trade network we didn't know about. It's like, well, yeah, Polynesian peoples sailed the entirety of the Pacific.
To Easter Island.
I can't remember if this is true or not, but apparently they had a bowl made out of copper that if you put your balls in it, you could figure out which way was north.
Is that called?
Don't know if that's a real thing. Junk compass, I guess, you know. But yeah, you know, trade, but they weren't white, so they couldn't possibly do it.
Right.
Tor Hirondal tried to make some bullshit with the Kon-Tiki and all of that stuff. Proved that it could be done incorrectly and can't be really considered as much science as he would like it to be. But that's another thing.
Yeah. So I read the Kon-Tiki growing up. For a 10-year-old, reading the Kon-Tiki
fantastic
is
something else.
Yeah, right.
And then you read it as a professional in this field, and you realize that he cheated.
Oh, I haven't even read it yet. I haven't read it since I was 10.
Okay. So you know he built the Ra and Ra 2, right?
Mm-hmm.
So he built 2 boats made out of papyrus in the Egyptian style, trying to prove that the Egyptians could sail to the Americas, supporting, before it became a real thing, the idea that Egyptians could have gotten over here and wound up in the Grand Canyon. Not really, but the idea that peoples from Africa influenced by the Egyptians could make technology to get to the Americas. And what happened the first time is that the boat broke apart, became waterlogged and broke apart, and he had to be rescued. The second time he made it, but he was in bad shape. And the thing that made it completely biased in respect to his attempts was he had a radio. He had modern mapping. He had modern weather charts. He had a modern knowledge of how things worked. Even if he didn't have that stuff, he still had an idea of, hey, I am here. This is what we know because instruments have shown. And he essentially walked into it with all of the X variables solved. He knew where he was going. That's the other thing, is he knew where he was going. So his hypothesis was fine. The way he tested it was, you know, he had all these variables he had to quantify and account for, and he didn't. He just was like, oh, hey, we sailed this boat all the way there, and ta-da, we made it. Proof that the Egyptians could have done it. Not that they could have. And again, that's one of those, let's ignore the fact that no indigenous culture says the Egyptians got here, and there's no other evidence that they got here, and there's no material culture, and there's no dead people, and there's no DNA, because guess what humans like to do? So yeah. Anyway, we went on a tangent. That was way not where we're supposed to go. External pressure on a civilization causes it to collapse.
So everybody in the chat is like 20 minutes behind us, and they're saying this is going to be a wonderful playback. But we do apologize.
They're going to love it. Yeah, sorry. I don't know. This is probably my fault.
I think it's the videos, because you're where you are on the West Coast and I'm where I am on the East Coast, and it's trying to link up with satellites in outer space, and they don't want us talking live about pseudoscience.
Is it? Oh, there's a conspiracy there.
So
the man doesn't want us to talk.
No.
So, anyway, so external pressure comes from people.
Yep.
External pressure. The Roman Empire falls. Why? Because pressures from peoples who want to both be Roman and want Roman stuff, you know. So the Roman Empire expands into Europe, and then starts farming out like duties and commands and whole army units and stuff like that to the locals. So eventually you have locals, you have Roman army units with centurions or magistrates or praetorians or whatever that are not Roman. They're Germanic, they're Gaul, they're Persian, they're British. They're all of these cultures that all of these places where the Romans showed up and established themselves. And they all want a piece of that Roman pizza. Why not? The Romans are awesome. The Romans have technology. They have roads. They have all of this cool stuff. And all the trade networks to back it up. And these people want it. Well, Rome kind of gets lazy, kind of forgets the frontier, and then the frontier turns around and says, hey, we still want to be part of Rome. We want Rome. They turn to come back to Rome, or they decide, hey, Rome's not that cool and we're going to do our own thing, and then suddenly Rome doesn't have an army because the army just said, hey, we're going to do our own thing. We're not Roman anymore. But Rome has stuff. So then they turn into the armies that march on Rome and sack it. 410 AD. Rome gets sacked. Well, not the first time. The Visigoths, a culture from outside that a Roman army at its peak would have absolutely mopped the floor with. They show up when there's all of this political stuff happening in Rome. There's all of, it's just cracking at the seams. And these external cultures start pushing and show up, and they do things like sack Rome, raid the capital, break stuff apart. And they shrink what is the Roman Empire, the Western Roman Empire, down to virtually nothing. The Eastern Roman Empire lasts for another 1,000 years until they finally can't stem the tide of Muslim countries and the expansion of what becomes the Ottoman Empire. Again, another outside force pushing, taking, shows up and destroys that culture, or destroys that civilization. The people are still there. The descendants of the Byzantines still live in Istanbul. The descendants of the Romans still live in Rome.
Yeah.
The people don't disappear. Their identity as Romans do, or Byzantians. The Han Chinese,
even today, if
the
you
Song,
go to
Song,
Italy,
the Song Chinese, the Mongols. Yeah. You go to Italy?
I was going to say, even today, if you go to Italy, the population of Rome, they don't consider themselves Italians. They consider themselves Romans.
Roman, yeah. But their civilization has collapsed. The hallmarks of what was Roman civilization is no more. The Song Empire in China, the Mongols show up. External pressure, wanting their stuff, wanting treasure, better military, better suited to combat. Song Empire eventually collapses, both because of external pressure and then internal stuff, sociocultural reasons, intrigue, political stuff. All those factors fold together and eventually wind up collapsing an empire or collapsing a civilization. So it's external pressure,
economic imbalance,
natural disasters, economic imbalance. Okay, this goes back to trade networks. You have your neighbor has more money than you, can buy up all the stuff. You can't. Eventually, your town is going to say, hey, we don't want you as a leader anymore. We could go be with that town and have stuff. And they do.
But do we?
Or, so the United States set itself up to collapse by sending all of our production overseas.
Mm-hmm.
We are a nation of consumers. And I guarantee you, 21 minutes out of sync. Holy shit.
I saw that.
I guarantee you that if tomorrow we had to be suddenly reliant on what we produce in the United States, this country would completely collapse. Done. And as such, the civilization.
What do
because
we produce?
We are so... That's a very good question. A lot of stuff. We produce iron tools. We produce electronics. We produce all of this stuff on such a small scale that it cannot feed the population. It cannot support the country. You know, you can buy a sledgehammer from this place in Pennsylvania that still makes good sledgehammers, and it costs you 3 times as much as a Chinese sledgehammer. That you could buy one, and they make 1,000 a year. The Chinese ship in 100,000 a year. Our economy is being muscled out. So, yeah.
I mean, all 6 of the what do we call them? The consistent reasons.
Hallmark of death.
Yeah. We as a country are in all 6 of them. In some way, shape, or form.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely.
And
absolutely. We're not the only ones. We're just the most visible.
Yeah.
Because I mean, look at the other countries. Look at other countries. Russia is getting its ass kicked. I don't care what anybody says. Guarantee you, 2/3 of the population in India is probably starving, or is extremely malnutrition. You know, the Chinese. There's a massive disconnect between agricultural and urban. North Korea is just a crazy man's playhouse. You know, all of these countries have a significant have these significant changes that if the Jenga piece is pulled, they're going to fall. The only difference is how far. You can pull the Jenga piece out and lose the top 2 levels and be okay. You can pull the Jenga piece out and the whole pile of bricks come tumbling down. You know, it depends. The amount of influences towards culture or civilizational collapse is that we can see in the United States today is incredible. Historically speaking, you know, every single big civilizational collapse has it. Smaller civilizations might be so very focused on a single impact, you know, like the Nabateans. You know, they probably would have been just fine regardless of trade stuff if their water hadn't gone. Their water goes, well, the civilization can't live there anymore. Next one, sociocultural.
Social or cultural rigidity. Or political fragmentation, whichever one you want.
Political fragmentation. So political fragmentation is pretty basic, pretty straightforward. The political entity that controls the civilization has problems internally and shatters. Alexander the Great came up earlier. Alexander the Great's going to come back again. The Macedonian Empire. The empire built by Alex the Great. He dies at 32, right? He does not have a son, or I guess he did have a son. He doesn't have any heirs, though, because they all get killed. His generals, his like 5 generals or 4 generals who were his, quote, best friends, they all expected him to name them successor. That did not happen because he died. They suddenly decide they know better than everybody else. So they made the conscious decision to break the empire apart. So you have the Ptolemaic dynasty in Egypt. Ptolemy, his general Ptolemy, takes over Egypt. Another general took over Greece. Another general took over the Middle East. You know, another general took over like the further east. And you have, like, that's a very purposeful inside the government disagrees and they make the conscious decision to break it up. Other places you'll have that same kind of thing where it backfires. You know, the Mexica. Everybody knows them as the Aztecs. The Mexica Empire was a confederation, was a blending of lots of little distinct cultures and little distinct groups that all had to pay fealty to the Mexica, who are like the dominant tribal group, if you want. Cortez shows up, and he runs into a people that are not Mexica, they're something else. But they are beholden to the Mexica, and they are not pleased with the leadership of the Mexica. They ally with Cortez. And they give Cortez that chance that he had to not immediately get wiped out. With their thinking that if we let these metal-clad white dumbasses do all the heavy lifting, we can kick the shit out of the Mexica and we can be in charge now. And that didn't happen for all the reasons that we talk about today with colonialism.
Mm-hmm.
That was a political division inside, making a decision that fragmented the empire. The Romans deciding to field out commands and stuff in Europe, commands and landholder status and all of these things, and then the people are displeased in the empire. What was it? They had they went through 32 emperors in like 3 years or something
like that,
where you had one group said, oh hey, I know better than you, I have an army. He shows up, he kills the current Caesar because he has an army. Well, this other guy who's like, well, I know better than this punk, who's the general of the said army, kills him, becomes emperor, and then gets a bunch of his buddies together and say, hey, we can do this better. And then one of his buddies stabs him in the back. Oh, I can do it better. This is that political stuff inside. And it's insane when you think about, even if it's 100 people, these group of 100 people fiddle fucking around are making decisions that completely fuck the entirety of a civilization as it trickles down.
And it's all intertwined.
Like that's not happening today.
It's all intertwined and connected, because the next thing under this is the social cultural rigidity, and that is the inability to reform institutions.
Yeah.
If you've split your political base, how are you going to reform institutions?
That's the inability to reform. Yeah. So in the United States, a great example. The rigidity to not change, certain aspects of how we do things. For 70 years, we've supported Israel because Israel was a foothold into oil country in the Middle East. We needed a friend. The Russians were way too close. We used Israel accordingly. We had a friend. Israel. Now we really don't need them. Man, if we made an effort to be friends with anybody else in the Middle East, we could probably do it. The problem is that there's a bunch of fucking old people who are like, well, we don't want to give up on this because blah, 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 blah. And it's not, they're willing to sell out so much of their integrity or so much of their, their belief system to continue backing this, That's a rigidity thing. The Christian church is gutting itself right now. It's a civilizational building point, organized religion. Well, you have how many veins of Christianity that can't agree with each other? A lot. Yeah. You have Christianity that in this country who is so fucking strict, they don't have any sort of technology. The Amish, the Mennonites, stuff like that, which fine, cool. And then you have Christianity, which Jesus is my homeboy. And they don't care if you're gay. They don't care if you're trans. They don't care anything. They're just like, peace, love, man. Jesus, my homeboy. The words of God. And they're completely on the farther end of the spectrum. And everywhere in between, you have varying degrees of rigidity, of change. But a bunch of the ones that are the most powerful refuse to change in the smallest ways. Let's not hate on everybody. Let's not force our religion on anybody. Let's not, destroy. Let's not dismiss all of this history. Let's be more inclusive. They don't want to do that. So the rigidity and the not changing, the modern, all cultures, all civilizations around the world, we're stuck on fossil fuels.
Outdated norms.
We could have figured out alternative fuels 50 years ago. We could have figured out alternative fuels 50 years ago. That would probably be just as good, if not better, than the engines now. We could figure out fuels that would run in the engines from 50 years ago and still work with modern technology. We could have done all of this stuff, but no, we're going to stay on fossil fuels. With operating with this idea of that, we don't have any sort of change. We don't have to change. Well, now they have to change. Oil's going to eventually run out. And suddenly now we're playing catch up with, we should have had electric cars in the 70s. We should have had hybrid cars in the 70s, and fully electric in the 80s, early 90s. Now we're stuck with one or two brands that are okay, and then a bunch of brands that are fucking garbage, that aren't conducive to economical production. That's a civilizational, in our case, civilizational rigidity to focus on one thing and not change. With this idea of, will this get better?
So in the 80s, me and my expertise with cars and automobiles and stuff like this, right? In the 80s, General Motors had a fully electric vehicle. It's called the EV1. They made 100. Yeah. They made 100 cars as test beds, and there's one that escaped the crusher
destruction. Yep. It worked so well that it would have damaged the income off of the 15 other models they had built. And it would be too expensive to tool up to convert those models that were in production to the electric. And they didn't want to spend the money to do it, so they destroyed it. Honda had a hydrogen car.
Mm-hmm.
Run on hydrogen. Run on water.
Porsche.
They didn't build it.
Porsche.
Why?
Back in the 1800s, had a fire truck that they had an electric generator on, and that's how it was powered.
Yeah, I mean, the technology to fix a lot of the stuff we've had for a while, it just needs to be refined. We might not be able to refine it till the modern day or, 20 years ago, but we have the ability to do it. The rigidity of us deciding, no, fossil fuels are good enough has prevented that. Hybrid cars. We should have hybrid cars. Some of the best and most powerful hybrid machines in the world are fucking train locomotives.
Mm-hmm.
And for their size and what they move and what they're capable of doing, they burn a surprisingly small amount of diesel. And they rely heavily on electric motors that are fed by trickle charges off of diesel generators that are not working as hard as they think. That is the way to build a hybrid. And that's a train. You mean to tell me we can't build a truck that's going to work on a farm that could be a hybrid? Nah, we could. It'd just be overbuilt, and then it would never break down, and then they wouldn't make any money.
99% of the trains in Europe are all electrical, or are all electric.
Yep. They're all electrical. Yep. And they run off of an electric network and grid that has kept up. Ours hasn't. So the rigidity, again, is a people thing.
Mm-hmm.
And it's like pedantic people things. It again comes down to the I don't want to be inconvenienced. The United States with gun control. You know, how much suffering could we have fixed if we got over this idea that guns are a thing? You know, let the loudmouths talk about it. Guns have been a responsibility and a tool for as long as they've been here, until like the 1970s, when they were on TV and in the movies, and suddenly everybody wanted one, and then suddenly became this cool thing. And you know, now you have people like Kyle Rittenhouse brandishing ARs, going, "It's my right given by God." Well, no, it's fucking not. And you have all of these people who will look in the face of something intelligent, like, "Hey, you want to buy a gun? Let's make a regulation that says you can buy a gun. You just have to wait till tomorrow to pick it up." I really want to know how that destroys your rights as an American. Doesn't matter. They'll look at that and be like, "You're infringing on my rights." Until now, Daddy Trump said the guns are no good. Now they're gonna flip. It's too late, because the rigidity of not changing any sort of gun legislation or having any sort of gun management or anything in this country that could happen without taking away the right to the Second Amendment. Well, now every single person who wants one now, or has been collecting them because we know the way things are going to go, suddenly has them. And you're still going to be stuck with the same, well, we still have them. And if you want to take them, it's going to end badly. You know?
Yeah.
So that rigidity and not able to change is what brings down stuff. Because you have to adapt. You know, you have to be, I mean, you see it in nature all the time. If you're an animal that exclusively eats trees, and the forests start thinning out and then eventually get replaced with grassland, if you can't evolve accordingly to eat grass, you either got to move with the trees or go extinct.
Mm-hmm.
Same thing. And it's little changes over the course of a long time. So a lot of the civilizational collapses have something of that in there, where they decided they did not make a conscious decision, but they made a decision to where certain things were not going to change or didn't need to change, or, you know, and looking at it like we're looking at it right now doesn't even work. You know, nobody made a specific decision to we're going to make sure this keeps going for 1,000 years. No, it's constantly brought up, shot down, brought up, implemented, brought down, you know, whatever, over generations and generations and generations, in some small form or another, that winds up creating this thing. You know, so it can't be traced back to one point where someone said, "I'm going to do this," and that's just the moment of break.
And that ties into the systems theory. The level of complexity of society becomes, the more energy it requires to upkeep it and everything else. Which to a point, if we got the complexity of, I don't know, the legislative branch or the executive branch down, we might stem the tide of a societal collapse.
Maybe. You know, the more complex a civilization gets, it's just going to take more. The bigger a civilization gets, it's going to take more. You know, when people think of, like, if you had a civilization, and this is going to sound kind of racially driven because it is a little bit. If you had a civilization that was exclusively one race, you'd have very little in respect to internal conflict, based on something as cliche and whatever as race. You wouldn't have that othering effect necessarily. When you have more interaction with people, and people who start looking different, and people who look completely different and stuff, these are the lines that our very simple human brains draw. You know, and then society can in some way make the decision that these are bad, or these are negative in some fashion. You know, I mean, God, were we talking about this today? My brain's going. We did. Where you have people who, for some reason, think that you have, in order to commit a crime, you have to be an immigrant. You have to be not white color. Well, at some point, somebody said, "Hey, immigrants and not white people do this," and they associated it with that, not recognizing that white people do it too, and so do green people and purple people. And people not in the United States, and people, people in Canada, people in Antarctica. Some guy got stabbed in Antarctica relatively recently, or I just might have been seeing some sort of article talking about how one guy stabbed another guy for some stupid reason. But it's like, it's, if you have a very easily identifiable difference, the people who want to control things, or a society with buttons being pushed, can focus on those things. There was a movie, and I was going to make a video about this. I don't know why television and movies has some of the most badass recognitions of humanity, and they're in a movie. Why can't this be every single day? Why can't this be in the schools taught? I think Colin Firth is the professor in this, and he's addressing a classroom of students, and he says the Nazi Jews was not without cause. And everybody in the classroom looks at him like, what? And he's like, the difference is the cause wasn't real. Which is profound. This is like this mind-blowing thing. The cause doesn't have to be real. It just has to inspire fear or inspire othering. So he then points out that people who are fat, or people with blue eyes, or people, with red hair, if you point out a difference, you can create a line in the sand. And the more complex a civilization gets, back to our civilizational conversation, the more complex it gets, the more variables you have to account for. How many religions are we? The line is drawn between Christians and Muslims in the world for some reason. There's very distinguishable traits to both, and yet there's people on both sides who do not fit into those categories at the slightest. Because of the difference, though, is that there is another association that they have with the bad thing, and that's where the line in the sand gets drawn. But then, say another religion shows up. America's freedom of religion. There's a bunch of people saying that it's freedom to be Christian. It's like, or it's a Christian nation. No, it's not. It's free. It's a nation you're free to be a Christian, but then you can also be free to be a Muslim, or free to be a pagan, or free to be Judean or Hindu, or anything like that. And then there's a line in the sand that gets drawn by some dumbass out there who points out, oh, well, the Muslims don't eat pork. You know what I say to that? Awesome. More bacon for me. Why is that bad? Well, there are people who are going to go like, well, I'm going to start stapling bacon to every place I like so the Muslims don't go there.
Do you know who else doesn't eat pork?
That's who?
The Jews.
The Jews. Well,
Orthodox Jews don't eat
pork.
The
Jews are white though. But they're white. That's the thing. They can look at a variable that applies to two different things and then find a reason why they don't have to worry about it for one of them. If I know people who don't eat pork because their doc said you can't eat pork. Well, we better exile them, Something I do want to say, though, it's a societal thing that really does make the complexity of a civilization even more complex. It's the societal. So when I was growing up, I was taught you know, we were all taught this. Be respectful. If you don't have nothing nice to say, don't say it. Pretty simple, straightforward stuff, right? There are people who absolutely don't be respectful. They go out of their way to be disrespectful. And their reasoning is, I don't have to. I don't have to. And then something happens to them, and they learn that unkindness has consequences. And it might be something as simple as, I'm not going to stop and help you with your flat tire. Well, they go to their job and they get penalized for being late to work, and they might get fired because they were late to work one too many times. This time it was legitimate and the tire was bad, but because somebody who's a different color or different religion than me didn't help me with my tire because I said something disrespectful to them, and they decided, I'm not going to help this guy. That's my choice. He's going to blame them. They're going to blame this other person for some, nebulous thing that then self-perpetuates. Sorry.
No, don't apologize, unless you're apologizing for the coughing, and then I don't care.
Coughing.
No, you're
I'm not going to apologize
right
for what I say.
No.
And it's this. I mean, this is something I wanted to say. Like the complexities of social interaction are such a difficult thing to manage. Imagine trying to do it you have a civilization of 5 million people. There are 10 different ethnicities. There are 20 different religions. There are, 30 different, different favorite foods. 40 different, types of shoes to wear. 50 different hats. Make sure all of that gets along and doesn't upset anybody else for any reason whatsoever. It's ridiculous.
Mm-hmm.
It's impossible. Because at some point, the human ego and the human need, and kick it back to the fact that we're animals and the instinct plays in there some very, 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 very deep down. Somebody's going to try to get an upper hand. Somebody's going to want an upper hand. Somebody's going to feel slighted. Oh, the people that wear the blue hat, or the people that wear the yellow hat, stole my girlfriend. Some guy wearing a yellow hat stole my girlfriend. So all the yellow hat people are bad. And if they practice the right kind of this faith, they wouldn't be wearing yellow hats. And that, that faith makes them eat this weird fish that the green hat people think is really pretty and shouldn't be eaten. I mean, this is a tangent we could go on for hours. Every single little domino in 1,000 different directions creates stresses inside the civilization that then cause it to break up, or cause stresses. Because then you have politicians who are going to cater to the people who are making the most noise in an effort to keep their position of power, so they can have the better food, have the better shelter, and have the better reproduction.
Yeah.
Well,
we have to continue on. That was a great talk about societal collapse. Beautiful talk on societal collapse.
Boy, that was convolution at its finest. I will apologize to everybody now. Make sure you have a drink. Put this at the beginning. Put a disclaimer. Have drink in hand to deal with this stuff, because it's so complex it makes your head spin.
Yeah.
Especially when you're looking at it today.
Mm-hmm.
And that is what makes some of this stuff so difficult. You know, the line in the sand is drawn on so many things, and somehow there are people that come up with a justification for it, or a justification to ignore it. And then there's people who are like, there is no justification for this. And the line in the sand gets drawn. And in this situation with the present administration and the way they, you know, they won't prosecute child molesters. That's a line in the sand I'm perfectly okay with.
Because they're led by
one.
one.
You know, they're led by one. And they don't want to admit they're wrong. But then but then also the one that's leading them made some sort of policy that made them feel better about their world. Oh, all of these people who don't look like me are being made to leave. So now I feel comfortable. Even though that was never the thing. And it's such a small variable that doesn't fucking matter. But there are people that make it matter. And if you get enough, I think the small thing matters. You get them all together in the same room. That one small thing can be a massive driving force into the outcome of something. Politicians, you know. Kamala Harris didn't condemn Israel immediately. And a bunch of people didn't vote for her on that principle alone. Ignored a massive red flag on fucking everything else. And went, again, just like with Biden. You know, Biden was a fucking Band-Aid. Kamala Harris would have been a Band-Aid. But oh boy, what a Band-Aid. Instead of what we got now.
Festering wound.
We live in a complex civilization. It's not going to change overnight.
No.
I would love it to, but it's not.
With that, we'll go to our to the Deadly Dungeon to find out who we get rid of this week. And it came down to 4 people. It came down to Jason Bourne versus Steve Austin, the $6 Million Man, and Jack Ryan, the Harrison Ford version, not any other version, and Chuck Norris. Right? And this was very interesting because in the Discord takes place over this. You guys chose Jason Bourne and Chuck Norris at the same amounts, where the algorithm that I use and everything else chose differently, which is fine. Now, I'm not going to go through it because we know who Jason Bourne is. He's a Spec Ops guy. We know who Steve Austin is. He's basically an android. Jack Ryan's just a normal guy, and Chuck Norris, well, is Chuck Norris. So, that we're running low on time. But, moving forward, our bracket for this week looks like this. And we've got 6 spots loaded into the next round. And we're going to choose our next 2. And we'll post these next 2 up in the poll. And then we'll go back to the live screen so we can say goodbye to everybody. But for this week's Deadly Dungeon, the first 2 on the list, Wheel of Mortality, turn. Tell us the people that we should burn. Arthur Bishop, the Mechanic, versus Buckaroo Banzai is first up. That'll be interesting. And the second group for round 2 is... Oh, this is going to be great. James Tiberius Kirk versus Buzz Lightyear. Oh, let's go back. Let's go back to the live. Let's go back to the live. Wolf, I know you don't play into pop culture stuff, but at least you should know who some of those...
Well,
Any thoughts?
Well, I think Chuck Norris is overdone. He's Gym Rat. Well, okay, so what version of Chuck Norris? There's Gym Rat Chuck Norris, which is the one that we know and love and we think is the memes make about. There's Texas Ranger Chuck Norris, who's just a cop with a boss who lets him get away with a lot of shit. And then there's Hairy Chest Chuck Norris, who, if you play the wrong music, it looks like he's having a completely different experience with Bruce Lee.
Well, the photo we used for Chuck Norris was the Lone Wolf McQuaid Chuck Norris version, so I think that's the best version.
So Chuck Norris from the Expendables.
Yes.
I don't know. He's a spec op mercenary. So he's a gun hand. He's not a spy. He's not a tactical spy. I would be willing to say that. Who is he up against? Jason Bourne?
No, Jack Ryan.
Jack Ryan?
Yeah. Harrison Ford's Jack Ryan from Patriot Games and from Clear and Present Danger. It's got to go to Chuck. I mean, it's
only because the character.
Yeah.
Not Chuck Norris, the character he played.
Yes.
So you shouldn't be saying Chuck Norris, you should be saying Lone Wolf, what's his name?
Well, I use Chuck Norris because Chuck Norris is a character, just like we have Jackie Chan on here, and Jackie Chan is a character. So,
it's still you still should call him Lone Wolf. What's his name?
We may do that in the future, but everybody's going to be choosing Chuck Norris because Chuck Norris can only defeat Chuck Norris.
I think those memes are so overdone. and I'm sorry, but if you change the music, it changes what the scene is. I can't get that out of my head.
You're absolutely right.
You get that soft jazz saxophone going, and they are having a way different wrestling match. Tell me I'm wrong.
You're not wrong. But I was more referring. I was more referring to the new set of individuals for next week. Who do you think? Who do you think? We've got. Who is it?
Buzz Lightyear and James Kirk.
Yeah, James Tiberius Kirk or Buzz Lightyear.
Okay. Is this the Buzz Lightyear as in the character he thinks that he is, or Buzz Lightyear as in he's the toy?
Yes.
Help. I'm going to say Kirk.
And Arthur Bishop versus Buckaroo Banzai. Now, Arthur Bishop, Jason Statham, the mechanic.
Yeah. And then Buckaroo Banzai.
To me, the first time I saw Buckaroo Banzai was just recently, like last year. And the guy who plays Buckaroo Banzai kind of looks like David Tennant to me. And as the 10th Doctor. Am I wrong in that?
Buckaroo Banzai across the 8th dimension. He's the guy who plays the first RoboCop, isn't he? He plays the bad admiral in Star Trek. The reimagined one.
And that's Alex Murphy, which we have Alex Murphy.
I would say that I would say that Buckaroo Banzai should take it because Buckaroo Banzai is traveling across multiple dimensions, and Jason Statham is just driving an Audi.
No, that's the transporter.
Special Forces Audi.
Yeah, that's not the mechanic. It's Arthur Bishop is in the transporter, not the mechanic. Yeah, you're right. I'm sorry, I was wrong. Yeah, we'll see. Vote in the Discord, people. With that being
Buckaroo
said,
Banzai, physicist, neurosurgeon, test pilot, and rock star.
yeah.
Wow, that's a lot of titles. None of them are really useful against a guy, though, who's like obviously Kung Fu Special Forces. So,
Neurosurgery. I mean, maybe he gets a good friend named Ron Wyatt who happens to be a nerve anesthesiologist and does some brain surgery. I could not believe that when I read that today, that Ron Wyatt was a
disagreement
nurse
in the chat.
Anesthesiologist. Yeah, they're like 20-something minutes
an
behind
anesthesiology
us.
nurse. I want to say something to the chat I know, but I'm seeing the thing on firearms. First, it's wait one day, then the regulations become more and more complex. People just need to be taught proper safe tool use. People say that having to be taught is a restriction of their rights. That is the fucking catch-22. The complexity is always going to be bigger and is always going to be worse because, I never officially took any sort of training. I am a dead shot at 1,200 yards. I never had cop training. I never had military training. I never actually took a class. The only gun handling class I ever took was hunter safety when I was 12. All of my education about firearms comes from my dad and my grandfather. And the set of rules that my dad put down in my head, like you're going to clean your fucking room and you're going to do your chores or we're not going shooting, stuck in my head. And the handing me the gun and saying this is always loaded, even if it's not loaded. And, the making me learn that it is a tool and a responsibility before it is ever a right. That's how I have never, knock on wood, ever had a situation where I've had a gun incident. I know law enforcement officers and military guys who have more training than I do stupid shit like blow a hole through the transmission of their truck because they put a loaded gun in the truck and they slam the door. I know people, though, who absolutely will not take any sort of training or any sort of class or have any sort of responsibility as, hey, you should probably learn how to do this before you do it. Because they go, it infringes on my right as an American to have a gun. I'm one of these people that thinks I should be able to have any gun I want. Any gun I want. Just like any car I want. If you hit somebody with a Volkswagen going 12 miles an hour and you hit somebody with a Bugatti going 212 miles an hour, I don't know what I was trying to say with that.
No, you're
No, seriously, I lost my train of thought.
Guns and rules and regulations and people.
Yeah.
People not understanding them. But in the 50s,
anyway, the complexity of the gun things. They taught this shit in the 50s.
They
taught this shit in the 50s. And you know what? Yeah. Yeah. And then they started cutting programs for money reasons because money. Mm-hmm. And because what was decided wasn't important enough. They got rid of home ec. Now, I know for a long time, people like, home ec is the girls' class. No, boys should be made to take home ec too. But the number of people, like when I graduated high school, I didn't know how to make a resume. I didn't know how to balance a checkbook. I didn't know how to, do my taxes. All stuff that you would have learned in home ec. All stuff you would have learned in the, hey, you're about to become a grown-up now. You might want to learn something like this. Even a Cliff Notes summary version on how to do it. That would be amazing. How to check your oil, how to check the air in your tires. And they cut program after program after program because it cost too much money at some point. And in situations like that, yeah. Now, you could look at it a civilizational thing. If you offer one course in one school, you better offer it at all of them. Oh, you have schools full of people who aren't white and aren't Christian. Well, you can't have them learning how to use a gun. So they drop programs like competitive shooting or, hunter safety or stuff like that. I mean, you have to pay to take hunter safety now. I didn't. I went to the high school. My friend's dad taught it. I sat in a classroom, used to teach high school English with a man with a loaded rifle. You could never do that now. What did he do? He taught us how to load it. He taught us how to use eject the magazine, how to cycle the action. He then leaned the gun up against the table and against the wall and against a piece of fencing he brought in, and we learned how to crawl under a fence or go over a fence without dropping it. What do you do when you harvest a deer? You unload the gun. There are people that argue with that. Oh, it's getting, that's infringing on my rights. And there's people who, people that don't ever learn that because they decided at some point, well, that's not important to learn. So it is never as complicated or simple as you can't have a regulation on something, or you should have a regulation on something. At this point, though, in this country, you exercise your right as an American. If you don't have the right thing scratched on your voting registration, they're going to shoot you.
Oh, they ain't even going to get that far. They're going to, with what they just did in Georgia, they're going to freaking stop people from voting.
Oh, I know.
You for your support and patience. When I started this project, I didn't realize how much of an undertaking.
That was a me. That was a me thing. I did something. But yeah, no, you're ups.
I think the lag is slowly catching up.
Yeah, I think it's that way too. I think now that we stopped talking about corruption in the government, they're allowing us to not lag so bad.
It's now picking up.
Yeah.
Of course.
Even the interaction between you and me, it's not so laggy.
Yeah. Well, I've stopped looking at the screens. Like, I'm looking at the screens, but I'm not paying attention to the screens because I'm not getting a reaction from you on the chat, on the YouTubes. So.
You're not getting a reaction from me. Sit here listening.
Well, I watch. If I look at the YouTube,
yeah,
I know. But you nod your head and you look at the screen and you look at the chat and you raise your hand to say something. I'm not seeing any of that because.
Oh no!
You're not moving on the YouTube screen.
I'm raising my hand not to say anything, but to agree. Like I had home ec.
Oh.
But
I didn't take home ec. Well, I take that back. I did have the class where you had to learn how to take care of a baby, and it was the carry around the bag of flour. But yeah, that was the class. That was like a week-long course. It wasn't a dedicated classroom that you went in and you got graded on being able to do shit. I think every kid should have something like that. Every single one of them. Doesn't matter gender. Doesn't matter color, gender, or anything. You absolutely learn how to cook for yourself.
So in 7th grade, we had a class called Wheel, right? And it's Wheel. Mm-hmm. But it was like 7 classes over the course of the year that were combined into, you did 2 weeks or 3 weeks here, 3 weeks at this class, 3 weeks at this class. I had home ec, wood shop, technology or computers and technology, Spanish and French, and all sorts of stuffed into one grouping of a class. So
that is, if that works for teaching styles, that sounds like a great idea. I did not have any of those things. I had shop and I had IA Tech, which was industrial arts technology. And that was the class where we were given like 3 sheets of paper, like printer paper, 4 paper clips, 12 inches of tape, and we had to make a structure that would support 250 pounds.
Nope. So we had computers where we learned how to use and operate the Apple IIe, but the only thing we could ever do on it was play Oregon Trail, which is the greatest computer game known
You
to
can
man.
play on the Library of Congress website. It's there in the archives. Play the
Nice.
Oregon Trail.
And then we had technology class where we learned about lasers, and we were able to use our flight simulators and play Flight Simulator, Microsoft Flight Simulator, like 1 back in like 96.
Yeah, it was Flight Simulator 96.
Yeah.
You had like a Cessna and a 737. That was it.
Good old days. We also
I didn't even have computer access until high school.
See, this was all
We had 1 computer when I was in middle school, which was in Hall, and we played Oregon Trail on it. That was it. And Number Crunchers, which was like a math game.
Oh, I remember Number Crunchers. But those were on those things that people don't know about anymore. The 5.5-inch floppy disks.
Floppy disk. Yep.
Now we've got a floppy
we had 2
disk
classes,
off it.
2 language classes in school.
What's that?
That's an insult to the floppy disks of the world. We had German and Spanish language courses in my high school. And the lady who taught German was like, you had to take German 1. You had to. You could not take German 1 if you were a freshman, a junior, or a senior. You had to take it as a sophomore. And she only let in like her favorite students. So anybody who wanted to learn German, you had better be on starts with a G. I can't remember her last name. Starts with a G though. You had to be on her good side. And if you had a certain grade in science class, if you were a certain grade or above in science class, you went to Mr. Kuchel's biosciences class. And if you had a certain grade and below, like I did, because I went through high school with undiagnosed learning disabilities, you wound up in Mr.